Hello, this is Mrs. Murdock, and today what I want to do is explain how, when you have a graph with data, how you can write a claim and evidence reasoning section, which analyzes the data in that graph and do a really good job on it. So what you want to do first is look at the graph. This is a graph that my biology students did on the effect of putting soap in water and then having two samples of water, one that has soap in it, one that doesn't, just plain water, and using those samples to drop as many drops onto a penny as you can. So as you can see from the title, we're looking at the effect of the dissolved soap on the average number of water drops that can fit onto a penny, collected by Mrs. Murdock's biology classes. Sample size 59. Now that's significant. That means 59 people got the data to make this little bar graph for plain water, and their average was 28 drops. 59 people got all kinds of numbers, and the average was 28 drops. 59 people also tried doing it with the soapy water, and the average for those 59 students who did it was about maybe 20 and a half drops, okay? So that helps in terms of analysis, because what that tells you is that a lot of people were involved in these two single bars of data. So that also helps us think that it might be more reliable. So the IV in this lab, is the actual type of the water, whereas the DV is the number of drops that were measured. So when you write a claim, you want to just write the effect of the IV on the DV in a simple sentence. So the simplest way to say that, and many of you did this, was just to say the more soap was in the water, the less drops of that would fit onto a penny. That's one correct way of saying it, one correct way of saying claim. Some people might also have said that plain water was able to fit more drops on a penny than soapy water. That would also be a valid claim. Either one of those sentences would be just fine. Now, one thing that some students did I know that they were trying to be clever, and I know they were trying to understand things. They went a little bit too forward and decided that, oh, we're going to start explaining the science before we actually make the claim. So there were some people that said something like, plain water has better surface tension than soapy water, which is not part of the claim. That actually goes down in the reasoning. So if you did that, easy to fix. With the claim, all you really want to do with the claim is just say what the data, what the IV and the DV were doing, right? That's all you want. So what you want to do is just say, well, if my IV was the soap in the water, then you say, as I increase the soap, what happened to the DV, which is the drops on the penny? You say that as I increase the soap, the less drops of that water would fit onto the penny. Or I say the plain water, right, which was basically our control, was able to fit more drops on a penny than soapy water. That's the claim. You don't need to explain anything yet. You're just explaining the relationship between the IV and the DV. Now, evidence. Evidence, most people did very well on this too. All you had to do with evidence was clearly explain what the numbers on the graph and what the data in the graph, how that supports the claim that you made. So what some people did, which I thought was just fine, some people said something like the average, and it's good to say the average number of plain, let's spell it correctly, plain water drops that fit onto a penny was 28 drops. Be specific, right? The average number of plain water drops that fit onto a penny was 28 drops. The average number of soapy water that fit onto a penny was 3.5. Now, if you really want to impress me, What was really significant here and what I talked about a few minutes ago was the fact that 59 students did this. The sample size was 59, right? So there were 59 students who collected this data. So this makes our conclusions from the data more reliable because the sample size, right? The sample size, was high. Now you wouldn't have been able to be as certain about this data if only two people had been doing this lab, and you had a sample size of 2, you wouldn't be as certain really that you really had enough data to be able to make the claim, the soap really made a difference. Not if only 2 people did it, but you've got almost 60 people that did this in 2 different classes. So that makes us more more certain, more confident, right? We're never absolutely certain. In science, we always want to be a little skeptical, right? But this data, since we got a nice high sample size, and since there is a pretty big difference between the soapy and the plain water averages, we're going to say that, our claim is supported. All right, now reasoning. Here's where everybody had the right idea to begin with, and then they just stopped. A lot of you said 1 or 2 sentences that were a good start, but then you just didn't finish your ideas. So with a reasoning, and since we're talking about water chemistry, and we've learned so much about water chemistry, and everything about water chemistry is figuring into what's going on with this experiment, start by just stating some basics. Pretend that you are explaining something to a sibling or to a parent or to someone who doesn't really know a lot about science, that you're really simplifying it and you're making it very clear, one idea at a time that connects to the next idea and then connects to the next idea, right? So very simply, first, tell me what you know about water. So first of all, I might say that water molecules are polar. I would start with that sentence. And then I would say, this means that they have negative and positive ends on their H2O molecules. Because of this, water molecules in liquid form interact with each other by hydrogen bonding their negative and positive ends. This is called cohesion. There. That explains an awful lot. That gives us a big foundation for understanding why that water made a dome on the penny. Okay, just that's a very, very good beginning. And you don't have to say all of that, but you should at least have been able to say some of that because that was in your notes and you were allowed to use your notes. Okay, so first of all, some basics about water. Now, the second thing is, let's define surface tension. Surface tension of water occurs because water becomes more attracted to other water molecules. That's terrible. Molecules on the surface than to the air above the liquid. There was a picture in the video that I showed you that showed that, right? So surface tension water occurs because the water is very, it's still loose. Hydrogen bonds aren't strong bonds, but they become, they form a skin on the water. So let's say that. Some of you actually said that, and I thought that was a really good thing to say. Surface tension of water occurs because water becomes more attracted to other water molecules on the surface than to the air above the liquid. This causes I'm going to put it in quotes, a skin to form so that the surface of water can support small light objects, like you saw in the video, like pins or water striders. Insects, right, can do it. It also caused the dome to form on the penny when we dropped clean water onto the penny. Okay. There. Tell me a little bit about surface tension. Okay. First, we talked about water, right? Water molecules are polar. You guys can do that. First, tell me about water, right? Then tell me about surface tension. Some of you even looked it up. I told you you could do that. Go ahead and take advantage of that. Okay. Then finally, tell me about the soap. What happened when you added the soap? So what happened when soap was to the water? Here's what happened. Soap is a surfactant. Even if, even if you're not sure what that means, right? If you can explain what the soap did, you're basically explaining a surfactant, okay? And the video talked about this. So the video said that soap molecules, right? Soap molecules have nonpolar and polar ends. When you put soap on water, it spreads across the surface. Hence the word surfactant, surface. It spreads across the surface. And what's the best word to use? Disrupts all the surface tension between water molecules. There. That is why soapy water on the penny did not form a dome. It stayed flat penny. And thus, we could not drop as many soapy drops on the penny as plain drops. Whoops. It's not spelling that right. Penny. Soapy. No. So. Okay, so there's a lot of possibilities here to make whatever you wrote better. Do you have to write all of this? No, but you definitely have to write some of each of these three parts. Tell me about water, right? Tell me about what water's doing. Tell me some basics. We learned some basics. Give us the basics. Mention what hydrogen bonding is. Tell me what surface tension is. With plain water, what is the surface tension? How does that work? You can look that up. You can figure that out. And then what happened when the soap was added, right? What happened with that? You could do that, okay? So that's the anatomy of a good reasoning. That's the anatomy of a good reasoning, right? You want to explain it to somebody and connect the dots of the knowledge for somebody so they can really understand what happened in your lab and why it happened. And there's nothing here that you can't do, that you can't write, okay? Writing is hard. I know writing is hard. But when you have this much help, when you have your notes, when you have a video, make use of it and really explain, like you're talking to your little brother, like you're talking to your little sister, and make it so that they can understand. All right, and I hope that was helpful.